Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Armand Borgai. We're back today with episode 3. As always, like, comment, subscribe, check us out on our other platforms. Let's get right into it. Okay, I want to talk some boxing. If you know me, you know I'm a huge boxing fan, and I might even go as far as saying it's my favorite sport, so I love talking about this. Now, you may or may not have heard, because boxing is truly awful nowadays at promoting fights, but this Saturday, February 21st, Ryan Garcia will be taking on Mario Barrios for the WBC welterweight title at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Ryan Garcia will be looking for his very first world title, while Barrios will be looking to defend his title for the 4th time. Now, this is an interesting and hard to call fight. Ryan is currently sitting at a minus 250 favorite, and I don't think I quite agree with that line. Both fighters are coming off less than impressive performances in their last fights. Barrios coming off a draw to 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao, and Garcia coming off a unanimous decision loss to Rolly Romero, where he got dropped in the 2nd round. Now, it's hard to know which version of Ryan you're going to get nowadays. He lives a lavish lifestyle, he's a big and active social media guy, and there's been some real questions about his motivation and commitment to the sport. And that's the real question heading into this fight. Is Ryan fully locked back into boxing, or is boxing just one part of the Ryan Garcia brand? Boxing is a lifestyle, and it requires complete focus and commitment. You don't play boxing. It's not something you can half-ass and expect to have success. Every time you step into that ring, you're putting your life on the line, and there's no one who can help you in there besides yourself. And Ryan knows this. He's been in the game long enough, and we've seen what he looks like at his best. When he's disciplined and fighting behind his speed, he's legitimately one of the most dangerous punchers in the sport, with an absolutely lethal left hook. We saw what a fully locked-in Ryan looks like against Devin Haney. But we've also seen what an unfocused and unmotivated Ryan looks like in his last fight against Rolly Romero. Now, Ryan himself admitted after the Romero fight that he felt a disconnect from the sport leading up to the fight. After all the drama following the Devin Haney fight and the doping controversy, he talked about a lack of motivation, not training properly, and not being in a good place mentally leading up to that fight. So the big question is, what version of Ryan are we going to get Saturday night? Is Ryan still committed to boxing to the degree that the sport requires? Ryan himself seems to be well aware of what's at stake in this fight. In an interview with DAZN, he said his career is on the line Saturday night, and that this fight will either be, quote, my burial or my resurrection. Mario Barrios, on the other hand, is almost the complete opposite personality-wise. No flash, no massive social media presence, just steady physical boxing. Barrios is long for the division. He'll have a 3-inch height and a 4-inch reach advantage over Ryan. He's durable, and he fights at a pace that can wear opponents down. He's not the fastest guy in the world, and he does get hit a lot, but he's proven that he can hang when it comes to ugly, gritty fights. Stylistically, this is an interesting matchup. Ryan will almost certainly have the speed advantage, and if he can establish that left hook, he absolutely has knockout potential. But Barrios' size and pressure could turn this into an uncomfortable fight for Ryan if he doesn't get respect early on. I think the longer this fight goes on, the more it favors Barrios. Ryan has shown a tendency to fade a bit when he's forced into prolonged and physical fights, and that's where Barrios tends to thrive. Barrios is also more experienced at the weight class. In my opinion, he has a way more impressive resume, and he has more of a championship pedigree. He's been in more title fights. For Barrios, the key to victory is going to be to neutralize that left hook, and that's going to require disciplined defense, keeping that right hand up, and also footwork. Barrios is going to have to get creative with his footwork because he's facing a unique fighter. Both fighters are orthodox fighters, which means they're right-handed. Orthodox fighters usually want to circle to their left. But when you're fighting another orthodox fighters, you tend to want to circle to the right to avoid the other orthodox fighter's power right hand. But with Ryan, his best punch is actually that left hook, even though he's right-handed. So constantly circling to the right means you'll be circling towards that left hook, which is something Barrios needs to be careful with. I think he needs to mix up the footwork to keep Ryan guessing and unable to set up and time that footwork, or that left hook, sorry. For Ryan, I think he needs to hurt Barrios early, otherwise he risks getting walked down. And I also think he needs to put together some combinations, which isn't really his style. He's more of a sniper. But we saw in Barrios' last fight, Manny Pacquiao had a lot of success attacking in quick bursts, throwing combinations, and getting in and out of the pocket. And I think with Ryan's speed, he can replicate that same thing well. And he also needs to use the threat of that left hook to set up his other shots. We know that hook is his money shot, but Barrios is going to have to make trade-offs the entire fight, deciding whether he's going to circle towards that left hook or towards Ryan's power hand, his right hand. Ryan can't, get stuck trying to only land that one shot. He's got to mix it up. He's got to go to the body, get Barrios to bring his hands down, set up the shots upstairs, control the pace of the fight. Barrios would love to come in and walk Ryan down and turn this into a brawl. Ryan can't let him do that. With all this being said, as much as I would love to, and as much as I'm rooting for him, it's hard for me to back Ryan in this fight, given the version we've seen of him recently, both inside and outside of the ring. I'm a big believer in the amount of commitment this sport takes, and that if you're not fully locked in and bought in, it will show in the ring. Obviously, this is also a great chance for Ryan to bounce back. If we get the best version of Ryan, I'm sure he will win this fight, but, I need to see it first. A victory for Ryan could set up a lot of exciting fights in the division. But, gun to my head, my prediction is that Mario Barrios is going to edge out a close decision. I do really hope Ryan can prove me wrong and get back to being that exciting and surgical fighter we've seen him be in the past. Okay, I want to talk some college basketball. Specifically, I want to talk about my alma mater, Villanova. What was once a powerhouse program, always in the mix to compete for a national championship, is now going through a dark age after the departure of our legendary coach, Jay Wright. The Wildcats have completely missed the NCAA tournament for the last 3 years after going to the Final Four 4 years ago in Jay Wright's last season. After Jay Wright's departure, the program brought in Kyle Neptune to be the new coach, and it's safe to say it didn't work out after 0 tournament appearances in his 3-year tenure. This year, the program has brought in Kevin Willard, former Maryland coach, to be our new coach. And it seems like things are finally getting better. But how excited should Villanova fans really be? The team currently sits in 3rd place in the Big East, with a 21-5 record and are on pace to finally make a return to the NCAA tournament. This already is a massive improvement and a better outing than any of the last 3 seasons under Kyle Neptune. They've even been receiving votes to enter the AP Poll Top 25 rankings, and a lot of people think if they can sustain this success, they'll crack those rankings. And, props to Kevin Willard for getting this program back on their feet, but a simple fact remains that many Villanova fans seem to be blissfully ignorant of, which is that Villanova can't beat any good teams. They have faced 4 teams so far this season in the top 25 and have lost to all 4 of them. I think your stance on this issue really depends on what your standard is. Over the last 3 years, a lot of Villanova fans have lowered their standards. And honestly, I get it. I don't blame you. If you didn't lower your expectations, there hasn't been much to celebrate about Villanova basketball lately. But the truth is, moral victories have replaced actual ones for us. Competitive losses have started to feel like progress to us. And being a respectable program has become the goal instead of being feared like we once were. But I'm not one of those people. I'm not. My entire life, Villanova was a basketball powerhouse. They were a top dog program. The name meant something. Opponents circled Villanova on the schedule because beating them mattered. Recruits wanted in because Jay Wright built a culture that combined development and attitude and winning. And now, what used to be our floor has become our ceiling. 4 years ago, I would have told you there's no way Villanova doesn't make it to the Sweet 16. And now, I would tell you it's a miracle if they do. They simply don't have the roster to compete at the highest level anymore. And it all boils down to NIL. But Armand, what are you talking about, dude? We have $3 million in NIL. How is NIL the problem? We have tons of money. The problem isn't money. The problem for Villanova is that NIL has exposed a structural weakness that never mattered before. The problem isn't funding. It's appeal. Jay Wright was the program's gravitational force. He made Villanova cool without trying to be. Players trusted the development over the exposure because Wright consistently turned underrated recruits into national champions and NBA players. When he left, the intangible valuable that carried Villanova in recruiting left with him. And now recruits are just making rational decisions. I mean, why would a recruit take an NIL deal to come live in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania at a small, quiet school not known for being really fun with uncertain national relevance nowadays when they can get equal or more money at a big football powerhouse, another blue blood program, or a school offering, both cash and visibility while they can also have the time of their lives in college and have a ton of fun. NIL didn't kill Villanova because they're broke. NIL killed Villanova because it removed the advantages that once compensated for what the school isn't. Villanova isn't a massive state school. It isn't a football brand. It isn't located in a major recruiting hotbed. And now it doesn't have the Hall of Fame coach whose culture overcame all of that. In the old system, Villanova won by developing 3- and 4-star players into great players over 3 or 4 years. Continuity was our strength. But NIL and the transfer portal reward immediacy and constant roster turnover. NIL favors programs that can reload instantly, not patiently build. And until our program can rediscover a cultural edge that makes players want to be there, this is probably the new normal. The program isn't one or two players away. It's a philosophical shift away. And now you're asking a proud and strong academic and religious institution to change its culture and approach to improve a sports team, which I just don't see happening / working out. Now I know people are going to say I'm being too negative and I'm being a hater. No, I'm not. I'm just not willing to settle for less. Yes, it has gotten better. Yes, it's only Kevin Willard's first year. Yes, I think it's going to continue to get better under Kevin Willard. But we still have a deeply rooted NIL issue that we don't know how to address right now. Competitive losses shouldn't be what we're striving for. It doesn't matter in the March Madness tournament if we lose to UConn by 1 point, we're still eliminated. I don't know what to tell you. I don't get any solace from that. Right now, we're not chasing championships anymore. We're chasing relevance. And for a generation of fans who grew up watching them cut down nets, it's hard to stomach that. All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you guys so much for joining me for our 3rd episode. Stay tuned for next week's episode. We put out episodes every week. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much.